So I want to get a little bit more into this notion of digital rights and us as consumers and why we have to be concerned about this. But it occurs to me that looking out into this audience, I bet a bunch of you have never read Consumer Reports. How many people have seen the magazine or gone to the website? I know, it's my contemporaries.
I won't take it personally.
Let's retrench for just a minute and describe for some of the audience. And I think maybe the way to do this is to talk about your campuses, what you do at your different locations, and that might give them some idea, sort of your history of consumer safety in particular.
So let's get started with why we even needed a place like Consumer Reports back in the day. And Consumer is no accident. Consumer Reports kind of emerged at the height of the advertising industry. And maybe that's something you talk a lot about at a business school, right? The marketing is usually the biggest budget item, at least it's the biggest one of the biggest for me. And it emerged because, advertising plays an enormous role in educating consumers and in shaping consumer demand in many ways. But at the beginning, it was also a lot of snake oil. And you were getting sold a lot of things that didn't live up to the promise of what you were being told. And that's the way a bunch of engineers got together and started testing products, created a magazine, and the magazine took off. People wanted advice about what was worth their money, their hard-earned dollars, and what was the quality. But they also wanted a source that did not support advertising. So one of the things people don't know about us is that we don't take any advertising whatsoever. So 90% of our revenue comes from the products and services people get from their membership. But we don't, it's an ad-free zone. And a lot of what the competition out there is not the case. And so that trust that the brand has been hard-earned over the years. It's not easy to do what we do and to have a business model that is totally supported by your members. But that is, in fact, what we've always been and what we really strive to continue to be.
So 375 acres, you said?
So what does that do for us? So we still continue to this day to be one of the top sources of information when you are making a decision about really big purchases that are consequential for you. So car being one of them. We have a state-of-the-art test track, 375 acres in rural Connecticut, where we test cars, and now we're into the EV testing, we're into tires. We also are the only place to test child infant car seats for safety, because we think it's important for you to know that the cars doesn't just match the inside interior of your car, but it's actually going to save your baby's life. And that's also the case with really large appliances. And we have a 25-acre campus in Westchester. We have about 60 labs where we do a lot of the testing for other products. And we also have an office in Washington, D.C., because we investigate, advocate, and also work on policy to really start to codify some of the problems we do find in the products that we see and that we test. I think I'll just say that most of us as consumers go into the marketplace and assume that everything in the marketplace is safe, secure, and is going to live up to the value that you're hoping. And it's also reliable. So not only do we test, but we have data over time for cars. So we can tell you the reliability of that car over a number of years based on the millions of surveys that we conduct with those cars. We think that's important if you're actually going to spend that kind of money on a car or a larger product. And of course, what we're doing now and what I'm really proud of is how do you test things that are connected products? And that's the place that we needed to go to and that I helped stand up because there are no standards for privacy and security of your connected products and the apps that you have on your phone and the information. So how do you begin to give consumers advice about how to navigate a landscape of a digital marketplace where it's a little bit of the Wild West and there are no rules of the road?
So you started with televisions.
Yeah, two things. So we started with televisions. Everybody seems to have one still. You're streaming more than linear television, but you're still watching it. And they seem to get bigger and bigger. And the Super Bowl's just around the corner. And don't you know, the time leading up to the Super Bowl is the biggest selling time for people to go out and get the biggest honking televisions you can possibly imagine. So we are always ready with our ratings before the Super Bowl because we know that's when you want to get that bigger television. But what you also want to know now is that a lot of the smart TVs are also collecting data about you, about what you're watching, what you're listening to, even what you're saying to each other as you're watching television. And when you get it from the manufacturer, it's set to a setting, a default setting, that maximizes the manufacturer's ability to learn about you and your watching habits. Most consumers don't know that, and they leave the setting as is. So we started testing the televisions, and yes, some of them are more hackable, some of them are less private, some of them are listening to you as you're watching them. So we created what we call a digital standard where none exists, and we said, in order for you to make smart choices about your television, here are the things you need to know and pick and choose what you want. And so as soon as you set a standard, right, you learned this in business school, you set a standard, companies, and you start to create a race between who can be the better television, more secure, if that's what you want, we started getting calls from the likes of Samsung and others saying, well, how should we do that? How should we test that? And then we started looking at other data. Now, what's nefarious about that is that the data about your behavior is also being sold to data brokers to use to sell to other products and tools. And so, in fact, you have become the product as well as the consumer. And I'll give you one more example, and this one really gets at something not in the hardware world, right? Because the television is still a piece of hardware that you have in your house. The other is, and here's where it's fabulous what we can do with our connected products, an app. Let's take an app. Who's checking apps for the same kinds of security and privacy? Nobody is. There really are no standards. So enter something called GoodRx. GoodRx is a remarkable innovation because you can't live in this country that has such a confusing and complex healthcare system, and you try and want to buy pharmaceuticals, drugs and prescription drugs, and you want that best price. You have to go out there and shop. And this app will tell you, if you just put in there, this is what I want, tell me where I can get this for the best price. So it was very popular. So we started to investigate it. And what we learned was that your information about your prescription drugs were being sold to others. Okay, now in the hardware world, that's a HIPAA violation. You're not supposed, your medical data should not be shared. That did not apply to this app. So we raised this to the Federal Trade Commission, and a year later they were fined $1.5 million. So that's the piece about us that folks don't know, is that not only are we telling you and sharing with you what you can and can't buy and how it might suit you, but in the absence of a real watchdog and in the absence of standards in a digital marketplace, how do you create them? Because at the moment, I don't see a lot of urgency coming from some of our legislators and some of the enforcement agencies.